Hello, everybody. Okay, great session so far. We have two more sessions before we break for lunch. So next on the agenda, we have Patrick, who's going to talk about how to turn a classical VDI environment into an intelligent modern one using Microsoft Windows Virtual Desktop. So welcome, Patrick. Over to you.
Welcome, and thank you very much for the great introduction, Ian. So, and welcome everybody to today's session from my home office, actually. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed the day so far. Today, in my session, I'm going to cover Windows Virtual Desktop and how you can extend its capabilities to transform an on-premises, like I wanted to say, classical VDI environment to an intelligent, modern environment on Azure. I'm really excited to speak in front of you and hope that you'll get some great insights about what is possible with WVD and how it can help you to leverage your labs or production environments to the next level, actually. What you're going to learn, or what we're going to focus today, is the difference between a classical on-premises hosted virtual desktop environment versus Microsoft's answer to cloud-based virtual desktop environments based on Windows Virtual Desktop. The second thing is how you can unleash the full power of WVD while benefiting from Azure's capabilities, even if they are not yet documented in detail. And that's what I saw during the past months a lot of time, that a lot of features which are actually working, which are compatible with WVD, are not even mentioned. And today I'm going to show you how I unleash, or how I suggest you to unleash the full power of WVD on Azure. You will also learn how to extend your current deployments with automation capabilities, which are very easy to deploy and which offer you a rich set of possibilities in the near future as well to extend the capabilities of your current WVD deployments already. And especially, I will show you as well how to benefit from all those capabilities already today. Let's get started. I'm already looking forward to your feedback after the presentation. Just to mention it quickly before, if you have any questions, you can use the Q&A pane to ask them. I will try to answer them as best as possible at the end of the presentation or even afterwards. Let's get started. Who is Patrick? Actually, my name Patrick Köhler. I'm 29 years old, working in Luxembourg, living in Germany, and I'm already working in the IT since 13 years. I'm technical leader for a 5-time Microsoft Country Partner of the Year in the small country called Luxembourg. I'm passionate blogger, and I started a blog around WVD and all the partner ecosystem in April 2020. You can reach that via wvdlogics.net. And I really love to share my knowledge and the things I found and with the community itself. And for that reason, I wanted to give a shout out to the WVD community, Neil McNolan and Stefan Dingemanze, who do a really great job on that. I can just recommend to have a look at their weekly newsletter summarizing the new capabilities around WVD as well as the partner ecosystem. But that's enough about myself. Let's dig into the actual topic. We're taking a look at a traditional on-premises VDI deployment, here represented as a standard Citrix deployment without virtual desktops. We see that administrators, customers have to manage a lot of infrastructure components. But besides keeping these services operable, they have to take care of several tasks in their daily business, starting from version and update management for the infrastructure itself when it comes to operating system updates, the updates for the components, or even the virtual desktop, which is sometimes not that easy, especially when we're talking about virtual desktop environments, which are most likely customer managed. They have to ensure a high level of security besides managing their VDI environment when it comes to firewalls, DMZ management, network ACLs, and a lot of stuff more related to security and networking. And another big topic is licensing. And what do we do if the customer forget to extend the licenses? I just had a case yesterday about this, and it's sometimes really frustrated when even if you do a reminder as a service company and yeah, the extension hasn't been done yet. Additional services around the profile management, authentication services, file servers especially have to be managed in an on-premises environment. It starts with the Active Directory and the housekeeping, especially in bigger environments. This needs to be done or will be done by multiple teams at the same time. And this can produce a lot of mess which need to be cleaned up to let the VDI environment run in a performance state. But last but not least, of course, the desktops and the applications themselves, which can cost tons of time ensuring that they are running really properly while ensuring high productivity. I know that there's a big gap between the user's point of view when it comes to productivity and performance in this case, compared to what we see on the other hand. And I'm sure I have a lot of more argument, but it's not my intention to criticize classical IT infrastructures, especially not the VDI infrastructures. Just to sum that up, what we have to take care while managing on-premises environment is most likely the entitlement, brokering, image management, licensing, the maintenance in general, networking and firewalling stuff, server and storage, and when we do this on behalf of our clients, the hosting as well. So a lot of topics we need to ensure to make this run properly for our clients. But if we take a short look of the capabilities of cloud-based virtual desktop infrastructures, especially represented as Windows Virtual Desktop right here, Microsoft's answer to that VDI environments, we can quickly identify that the services the user actually needs to manage, regardless if it's an example or the example represented here is RDS or WVD, much less components need to be managed than in the on-premises environment. In this slide, you can see the services which are completely managed by Microsoft on the left-hand side. And no matter how you want to size your environment, if you need 10 session hosts or 10,000, if you deploy them in one geographical region or in 5 at the same time, that doesn't matter. If you want to provide a personal VM or a pooled session host for up to 20 users on one session host, Windows Virtual Desktop provides the solution for that question while having the backend services completely scaled and managed on your behalf. So you need only to take care of the security internally in your environment, of the virtual machines, basically the images you create, the golden images, and the deployment internally, as well as authentication services represented by an Active Directory domain controller, which can be present in a normal virtual machine, which can be also managed by Microsoft using Azure ADDS, for example, or even a VPN connected VM from the on-premises environment. But I wouldn't suggest to go for that. It starts from the latency or possible latency problems, goes to other problems as well. But when we have a look of what advantages do we have in such a cloud-hosted VDI environment, we see that update and service management will completely be done by Microsoft when it comes to the infrastructure components you see on the left-hand side. You benefit from the security features by default, which means while using Azure Active Directory, which is mandatory to run your Windows Virtual Desktop environment, you benefit from conditional access features, multi-factor authentication, as well as features like reverse connect, which enables you to publish which gives you the capability which just requires the port 443 to be open to the outside world, and Microsoft will control and manage the complete inbound traffic to WVD. And the last but not least point regarding the proper licensing, what I mentioned before, where the customer or the service company has to take care of on behalf of the client, we realized, and we saw as a service company as well, that the most clients are already eligible for WVD while having Microsoft 365 E3, E5 licenses, or Windows 10 E3 or E5 licenses, so that they just need to pay for the computing resources. But this will be not the main topic of today to talk about the licensing. I want to especially focus on how do you save money while operating Windows Virtual Desktop, with a few things I found out during the past months. But last but not least, before we jump into Windows Virtual Desktop, you can see here how you can benefit with Citrix and Windows Virtual Desktop. You see the centralized management capabilities of Azure as well given for the Citrix cloud as well in combination with Azure in this case. You benefit as well from running the Windows 10 multi-session image, currently available in version 2004 with MSIX app attach support in this case. And this has also the benefit, like I said before, of centrally managing the workloads in the cloud and extending the compatibility as well for older workloads or for older applications that need to run Windows 7. And Windows 7 is generally supported or has an extended support for Windows Virtual Desktop until January 2023, in case that it may fit or that it is required for your client. But I have a question to all of you. Are you ready to discover how to unleash the full power of WVD? I have some answers to that. But first of all, I want to explain for all of you who doesn't know WVD in depth yet, the Windows Virtual Desktop ecosystem from the very beginning. So to do so, let me explain you quickly the ecosystem from the very beginning. Basically, it's a summary of all components behind the scenes. While starting with WVD, the top layer of all Azure resources is, of course, the subscription. Below, we distinguish between the host pool actually, which includes the session host to deliver the computing power to our end users. These session hosts can be personal dedicated ones or pooled ones to host multiple users on one single session host or multiple session hosts. And they can be used in a persistent, which is the standard way, or a non-persistent way while using ephemeral disks on Azure. As well as they can be load balanced in two different types. First of all, the depth first mode, which just fills up the first session host until the second one or the third one will be utilized. As well as that we can use breadth first mode, which enables us to let the broker decide if there are free resources on a specific session host, and our sessions will be redirected directly to it. As a side tip, you can use Azure VM Image Builder to build and deliver the images in an more or less automated way. It's in public preview currently and built on HashiCorp's Packer. To grant access to your end users to the resources, and we're going over to the next step where we have our host pools, the session hosts for the computing power, we need to grant access to the applications, to the desktops, while enabling our users to the application groups. And since the latest release, which is actually the spring update of WVD, we have the possibility to enable our users in form of groups to grant access. This wasn't directly possible before. You needed to have some specific scripts to make that work. Actually, this works currently quite well from the Azure portal directly. And last but not least, we need to define a workspace where everything basically comes together. That means a user connects to the WVD environment, and while providing the workspace, the user and granting access to the application groups, our users or your users have access to the computing resources represented by the host pool, which includes the session hosts. Let's go a little bit ahead of this, because now we know how the Windows Virtual Desktop ecosystem generally works. But if we're going to extend this ecosystem with the components we need, we have first of all the storage components. That's clear. We need to save our user profiles in this case, and this will be represented as the storage, what you can see on the right-hand side. And we distinguish also here between two different ways of doing this. Actually, there are three, but the last one is something I wouldn't recommend in this case. Okay, the first option we have is Azure Files with Ad Authentication, which went into general availability last week already. Maybe you saw a lot of blog posts already on that point, how to get started with that. For me, it feels like it's already a long time ago since that is active, because I'm using it already since the beginning, since it's in public preview. The second option we have is Azure Netapp Files. And Azure Netapp Files is also a great solution to store your user profiles or MSIX apps if you already want to use them, but it's recommended for a larger demand of storage you need. Some people say 4 TB and above. And last but not least, you will see it's not mentioned here on the slide, is that you can also host your user profiles, MSIX applications on a file server, on a virtual machine, in your Azure cloud, in the on-premises environment with VPN connection. But as you already see, why I'm mentioning this, it doesn't really make sense to perform it in this way. For that reason, and what we saw and what we learned from the previous experiences while integrating Windows Virtual Desktop, we highly suggest to go for Azure Files with Ad Authentication for small or medium-sized workloads. And for bigger workloads, higher workloads, we suggest you to go for Azure Netapp Files. And last but not least, we extend our ecosystem by including automation capabilities into our WVD deployment. And to be honest, from the very beginning, I didn't want to use WVD before. It wasn't ready with, features like auto scaling or something like this. I was really missing that from the very beginning. And so I made myself on that topic. I tried to find solutions for that. And I've really started to go in depth with this once the spring release on the 13th of April was released. And first of all, I've tried to find a way to automate my WVD deployments while going for Azure Virtual Machine scale sets, which offer a possibility to pre-stage virtual machines, including the desired state configuration to be available when a specific hardware metric like the average CPU utilization or specific hardware interactions are made to up and down scale. This was a great way to get started, and it really works perfectly from the point of view of scaling. Especially the update management was also a point what I really like in this case. But it has one or two big disadvantages. Even if there wasn't any user running on the system, or even if we had just a single user running on a session host, and the metrics are identified to shut down, to deallocate, to remove this session host, the user doesn't get any notification. And this is nothing for a production environment. I was really struggling with that point, even though the solution worked pretty fine for us. But this was one point I was struggling with to suggest that to a client. But the test at least worked quite well. But for that reason, especially, I dived a bit deeper in that topic and how to get started with this. And I found a solution which combines the power of pre-staging the virtual machines we need as the session hosts via scale sets or the normal host pool deployments, if you are already familiar with this, and taking the advantage of Azure's automation accounts, including logic apps, to specify the user experience I wanted to provide to my end users. What does that mean? First of all, I have the possibility to define off-peak hours, and I specify how many servers or how many session hosts I need to have active during the off-peak hours. Additionally, I have the possibility to define exactly how many users can work on that session host as well. And if they are informed, if a scale down occurs, that means you have the possibility, I have the possibility to say, okay, I give the user 10 minutes of time to log off, to save their data before the session host will be shut down. And this is exactly what I wanted to know. And that is exactly what I wanted to have in this solution. And what makes the user experience with the automation possibilities, generally said, more user-friendly. And this brings me to the topic, how are you able to deliver the intelligence to the ecosystem of WVD, which is commonly working for every kind of sizing. So that was also a very important point to me, to not only make it available for small environments, it should be available and should be delivered for any kind of size. For that reason, I will quickly show you the recap of all those components I think helps us to extend the virtual desktop ecosystem. And now I'm going to present you my two solutions for automating your WVD workloads. And this is my #1 solution, which I made available to you since last Friday from the blog page. Links will be shared also after those presentations so that you have the possibility to figure it out, to see how it's working in your environment. And yes, while taking the power of the resources combined with the metrics to be validated with the logic app and the automation account, we can check on a recurring base, so based on a number of minutes, which will be checked, yes, in our case, how many operations or users are still working in our environment, specifically on that session hosts. We can inform our users that the off-peak hours are reached, and the company forces the employees to log off, or by just defining a minimum or maximum number of resources, you give the availability to some resources after those business hours to reduce the costs heavily. And to deploy this, I've created a tool, a PowerShell script actually, which easily combines the graphical interfaces and with some prompts in the PowerShell itself to deliver the complete solution from the automation account till the final automation in just 15 minutes. Probably you saw already some resources on the web describing that it's possible already with kind of the same approach. But if you follow this kind of solution, especially if you're not so familiar with PowerShell, you will see that this process to set up, if everything works well, can take up to 45 to 60 minutes. With this script, it only asks you the questions required for getting started with this, and it will be deployed in 15 minutes, I promise. Let's have a look at this, how this looks like in general. So first of all, everything is deployed within 15 minutes, which is a very big advantage when we cover only those for the moment. You can exclude machines from this scaling based on Azure tags. That means you can define a tag which automatically identifies, or the script automatically identifies them and exclude them from scaling. You benefit also from log analytics, which can be used for gathering the information on the start and stop behavior. And as well as mentioned before, users get notifications before logging off from the host or before they are going to be logged off automatically. And this can be also defined with a specific threshold. That means we can define the number of minutes the user has time before being logged off. But to give you full transparency, because it's a quite new script and quite new topic also for me, I will also highlight the points which should be improved in the future. First of all, and you will see that a little bit later, and you can see on the screenshot over here when we highlight the time-based automation, you see that there are many resources to be reviewed by my engineers. For the demo environment, I just put every resource into one resource group, so you will see the WVD resources on top of the screen, as well as the virtual machines represented as the session hosts. I think this can be improved. I will show you later on how I did it with the virtual machine scale sets especially, and you will see that there's a big difference between those solutions and how much to be managed, let's say, to get started with those automation capabilities. And last but not least, it's also the update management, which is quite important over here, while mentioning that you need to have a shared image gallery in this case to get started with that. While having a look at the other solutions, my so-called resource-based automation solution, it's a bit older. I started with this already beginning from the fall version, so the early version of WVD. And it was actually my first try to get started with automation while watching the resources on the machines and deciding based on metrics like the average CPU utilization per machine when the machine scales up or scales down. The complete image management can be done via a shared image gallery as well, so you can benefit as well from the same capabilities, except that the resource-based automation needs to get extended via a desired state configuration. So you will need to prepare this first. That means a domain join, which is required in this case. And like you see it here on the top half of the slide, the HP auto-reg DSC. This is my so-called host pool auto assignment DSC. As you might know, you need a registration key to join a specific host pool on WVD. This desired state configuration will automatically retrieve the key or regenerate one once the one is expired in your tenant, and will automatically add new session hosts to your host pool. That's the intention of that script so far. You can all read that on my blog already. It's well documented in this case, how that works once you want to try out one of both solutions. Let me show you the resources used for such a deployment. You can see the advantages are obvious. We have less resources to deploy as we have only a virtual machine scale set, and it can include hundreds of VMs if we like to have. We can scale them up and down based on the metrics we have. So we have a specific flexibility in our deployment, because what we enabled, and we have the possibility to easily downscale as well as to upscale when we define a minimum or a maximum number of machines that should be always preserved for us. But the problem is with this, and that's the reason why I always suggest to go for the first solution I provided, is that users don't get notifications on that point. and pre-staging of VMs. And this is what I'm going to show you right now in the practical demonstration as well. Takes longer than to pre-provision the virtual machines and just say, okay, we shut down, we deallocate, save the money, and we just start them up once it's required again. And this brings me to sharing my screen to show you exactly how both solutions work. And I've deployed that solution just a few minutes before so that I can show you at least the PowerShell script, how it's running, and to prove that it just takes 50 minutes to get started with automation. I'm quickly going to share my screen that you should be able to see in a few seconds. And over here, you can see my Azure tenant actually. I'm going to the resource groups, and you can see that I have a bunch of resources already created. And first of all, I wanted to show you my resource-based automation I've created. So I go into the resource group that you can see the resources I've pre-staged, the WVD resources for granting access to the virtual machine, and especially the virtual machine scale set, which you can deploy via an ARM template, for example, and it provides directly all the resources you need to get started. The magic is actually already done by just deploying the virtual machine scale sets and by going to scaling. Over here, you can define the exact metrics needed or when a virtual machine needs to be up and downscaled. In this case, in this easy example, I use the average percentage of CPU to be used. That means if there is over a certain amount of time, if I go into it, I define 10 minutes. Over 10 minutes, I have a percentage of 75% or higher. A new virtual machine will be scaled out. So that means a new virtual machines will be prepared for my users. And this is already done in a few seconds. The same, if you can see over 30 minutes, this is what you can individually configure over here. You can define over 30 minutes the average percentage of 25 or lower. Then the amount of virtual machines will be decreased by 1, or like you want to have it and like you want to configure it over here. You can also integrate more scaling conditions, which means also a scheduling that based on a specific schedule that all of the virtual machines will be deallocated. But this is not the intention because you know the disadvantages I mentioned before. And for this reason, I want to show you what are the advantages of of my recently created tool to help you get started with those automation capabilities. And for that reason, I quickly show you the resources I've pre-staged here. You can see my host pool. You can see the virtual machines over here, which I pre-staged in this case, and deployed from a normal shared image gallery with my version of the latest image I'm using. And I've started the PowerShell script I've prepared. You can see the links later on. And this is basically the outcome of that. You start the PowerShell script. It will ask you some basic parameters, for example, the working folder, because there will be some stuff like other PowerShell scripts to be pre-saved in that folder. You can enter the automation account name, the log analytics workspace, and as you need a run as account to perform all of those steps, you can provide a password, a strong password, to create this run as account automatically for you. If we go a little bit down, first of all, the automation account will be created. And to prove that it's already done in 50 minutes, you can see the start time. It was just 1 hour, approximately 1 hour before the session, 12:26, when I started this script. And if we scroll down to the very end, you can see the webhook URI, which is provided once the automation account is ready. And afterwards, he's going to create a run as account. In my case, I've already pre-configured this, and this is the reason why it drops me an error message. But it's not a problem because the script will just go ahead if he identifies that such an account is already in place for you. So don't worry about this. I'm working on that to finally solve it. And now the automation, here's the place actually to configure the automation. First of all, you need to copy the URI from the webhook you retrieved from above. Just copy it and paste it here. Define based on the recurrence you want to have the values in minutes. Define your peak hours, start, end. Define your time zone if you are working from another time zone in this case. You can enter the maximum number of sessions per CPU and the minimum number of session hosts that keep running during the off-peak hours. And last but not least, you define a message, a title, and a body, and how much time you give your end users before they are getting locked off and when the downscaling happens. Finally, this was everything. You can see after 15 minutes, exactly 15 minutes, the resource was deployed, and this is how it looks like. I've created a new resource group. Everything has been deployed over here. You can see all the steps and details from the blog page itself. And over here, you can see the automation account, the runbook, and the autoscaler. And just for the case that you need to adopt and you need to change your autoscaling, you can go to that resource and simply modify it by clicking on the Logic App Designer. This gives you the possibility, I'll probably make it a bit bigger for you that you can see it. You can define the recurrence interval. For this demonstration, I set it to a very low metric in this case, as well as all the other options we defined before. That means even in this case, you can modify everything over here. Nothing is wrong if you didn't do it. And this is actually what I did for my demo environment shortly before the demonstration today, where I can define all the metrics over here. And I can even say quickly that I want to have 2 session hosts up and running instead of 1 during my off-peak hours. And I can just click on save, and the magic will happen by itself. As we have a very short recurrence interval, we can see in a few minutes that the virtual machines will be automatically started for us. And if we exceed that time, which should be around 2:25, we will also see that the virtual machines will be automatically downscaled for us. Now let's go to the virtual machines. As we quickly mentioned before, that the session hosts are already pre-started. In our case, we are during off-peak hours, in the off-peak hours. And the only number of virtual machines I needed to start is 1. If we check back in a few minutes, you can already see that the second session host will be started automatically for us. It will take a few seconds, but the complete magic happens actually at this level. And if you want to benefit from logging and you want to see what actually happens during the process of that script, you can also see that while going back to the resource group, go back to automation, and you can see in the runbook or even in the Logic app if the step completed successfully. I wanted to already give you some insights what I'm going to deploy in the next version of this script, because this is already, or maybe you also know these capabilities. I really want to be able, or make you to be able to resize virtual machines at the downscaling. Because some companies or a lot of my customers already asked me, yes, we only have users working during the off-peak hours which need Office applications. We don't need to have that high demand of CPU or other hardware recommendations. So is there a way to resize that? And I already found a solution for that, but it's not yet built into the tool. So you can expect during the next few weeks that this will be added to. And this will be also a big advantage for those who really need those capabilities in your environment. So if we go back, you can see that the second session host is already up and running. And this is the magic behind it. And if we want to connect, I've prepared a short session host, and you can see over here the resource-based automation versus the time-based automation. And if I'm going to start my virtual desktop over here, configured in the breadth first mode, I'm directly in here to get started with my WVD deployment. And here we go. The session host is just started. That means it took maybe a few seconds longer than expected, but now we're in and we are able to benefit from the full power of WVD while having a fully automated environment in our back. And that's even before Microsoft is able to deliver that solution, because it's officially announced for the Q4 this year to be able to do it like this. You can see, and this is something that has been highly demanded on Twitter before. People reached out to me, can you please show us quickly regarding Teams? What do we need to take care of while operating Teams on WVD? This is just a side note, but I think it's really cool to show that, because there are just a few things to show actually to make Teams work pretty fine. And I quickly go back to my jump host and go back to my Active Directory domain controller, because I wanted to show you my GPO in this case for FSLogix, for the user profile container. And just as a side note, and to not confuse you with automation and Teams, just because it was so much requested, you can provide your environment with an XML file to redirect all those local Microsoft Teams folders to the local machine itself, so they will not be synchronized in the user profile. And I quickly show you how this looks like. You exclude basically the service worker, the cache, log, and media stack folder in this case. And the next time the user logs on, you can see something that is really, really strange and really good on the other hand as well. Because if you don't do this, you can see user profiles will grow to 4.5 GB. But with FSLogix exclusion XML enabled, and while logging in with my user Scott, which I've used before, we're just operating at 430 MB. That is the first point you need to take care of Microsoft Teams and getting started with WVD. The second point, what I highly recommend in this case, is to install the WebRTC service in this case to really offload the cache, offload the graphic redirection from your session host to the local PC. This is represented as the remote desktop WebRTC redirection service. Everything can be read, and the complete installation progress in my fully detailed guide on Microsoft Teams for WVD. And afterwards, you can benefit from the webcam, from the audio redirection capabilities of Microsoft Teams, and it works really like a charm. I can really highly recommend to go for this. This was just a very, very, very quick regarding Microsoft Teams, because those two steps are most likely mandatory before installing Microsoft Teams. And yeah, but if you want to know more, as like mentioned before, I will share my links right afterwards, and that you have the possibility to see in detail at your pace what steps are exactly needed, how does it look like, and what do I need to take care of, just as a side note. Okay. And this concludes my very, very short demonstration. Everything you saw here is really documented in detail on the blog pages. And let's continue with the few slides left. And that concludes basically all the demonstration steps before. It was, like I said before, just a very small one, but I can recommend you to have a look at those steps in detail described. And I would be very happy for every comment, advice, or critiques you can give me to improve that tools, to improve that way of sharing knowledge as well. But like I said, I do not do this for myself, because a lot of people are asking me, yeah, for what reason, for what intention do you do all of that stuff? It's not because I want to yeah, put myself in a better position in this case. It's really because I like WVD, I like the capabilities of the cloud, and I see the potential while using the full capabilities of the Azure cloud. And I really don't want to hide that knowledge from you. And for this reason, I started to create the official scaling tool, even if there are already some solutions available on the market by using third-party vendors in this case. And that's how you can benefit from that today. Just to give you the links quickly, like promised before, you can see on that blog page, wvdlogics.net, the article series about host pool automation, which I've created and documented each of those solutions I presented you before in detail. And the version number 3, or the automation part number 3, really describes in depth the solution, how to deploy that script in your environment and to get started with automation by just running a single script. There's also a YouTube video included that you see the steps in detail, and what I've explained before is mentioned there as well. And last but not least, this is the complete guide for Microsoft Teams on WVD. You can also retrieve it from that blog page, and all the points I've mentioned before, like the redirections.xml, like the WebRTC services, and the links to get started, can be read here from a single resource. And last but not least, because a lot of people ask me, yeah, how do you know about the latest versions and how do you stay up to date with that? As I'm doing a lot of, and I'm investing a lot of time in WVD and all the ecosystem and components and other vendors which are developing for WVD, I've created a small project called the timeline feature in this case to let you know and to let you stay up to date as well, get detailed status information on WVD, and that everything in a consolidated space. I will not exclusively cover WVD. I will also take the information I receive from the partners like Nerdio, for example, put them in there to give you one consolidated space to retrieve the latest information. And that concludes as well my demonstration and my presentation for today. Thank you very much to the organizers for having me today. Thank you very much for attending and participating to today's session. And I'm really happy to hear your questions, to answer your questions right away. And hope to see you again quite soon. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Patrick. That was awesome. Learned a lot from that. I got a ton of questions that have come in during the session. So let's kick off with, can I benefit from Windows Virtual Desktop if I'm using Citrix Cloud on Azure?
Actually, yes. Like mentioned at the very beginning of the presentation, you benefit from actually the Windows 10 multi-session image, which gives you the possibility to run Windows 10 natively without having a Windows Server operating system, even though that's possible. But that's actually the possibility Microsoft gives you to get started with WVD or the base components of WVD while using Citrix in this case.
Lovely. This one is, when will the Azure VM image builder be available?
Microsoft mentioned before that it will be available in Q3 2020. An exact date is not available yet, but you can already use it in public preview. There are some links I can share with you afterwards, with some good resources to get started with the Azure Image Builder.
Yeah, maybe paste those in the community chat on the site. So I've started playing with that as well. It's very interesting. When would you choose Azure Netapp files over Azure Files?
Yeah, Azure Netapp files is really recommended for high workloads or high demand of files on your storage. That means, or from the best practices point of view, you say if you have a demand of 4 terabytes of user profiles or storage generally needed in your environment, you should go for Azure Netapp files. If the value is below or somewhere in between, you should go for Azure Files with Ad Authentication. Just my recommendation on that point.
Cool. I think we have time for one more. So are there ways to test and play with these tools in an Azure preview account without having to pay for a subscription?
You can also use the preview account to get started with this solution, of course. That's not a problem in this case. As far as I know, you have a 130 euro free in the free subscription, in the trial subscription that you can use also for test this solution, of course.
Cool. There's a couple more questions in there, but we'll paste those into the community chat, Patrick, and then you can follow up in there. So thank you very much for your time today, and on to the next session.
Thank you too. Have a nice day.